Hello everyone and welcome to the final round of the GRENKE Chess Classic 2019. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and like we mentioned in the previous video, Carlsen has, he pretty much only needs a draw against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to clinch first place ahead of Fabiano Caruana, but if he loses to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Caruana beats Levon Aronian, then there will be a playoff as they will be tied for first place. So it's an important game, and let's just check it out. We don't have any footage as the game finished quite early, but Carlsen does have the white pieces, and he opens with c4. He again goes for his English. We have c5 by Maxime, the symmetrical English. We have g3, g6, bishop to g2, and bishop to g7. Knight to c3, just keeping the symmetry going. Knight to c6, knight to f3, and the d6 now. We have castles by Carlsen, bishop to f5, and now comes h3. And it's the same line that Carlsen already used last year in the World Rapid Championship, but we are going to mention that after Carlsen deviates from it. Just knight to f6 continues developing, d3. We have castles by Maxime, and now in the 2018 World Rapid Championship, Carlsen played rook to b1 here against Ivan Salgado Lopez in the St. Petersburg World Rapid Championship, as we've said, but here we have bishop to e3. Rook to b1 and e4 are known moves in this position, but the move Carlsen played here, bishop to e3, is a new move, and it's it's hard to say if he found it over the board or prepared it, but I did catch a glimpse of the interview after the game. They did not discuss this. But okay, a6, just preparing some perhaps future expansion on the queen side with b5. Carlsen goes for queen to d2. This nice bishop-queen battery aims for h6 to exchange the dark square bishops. And here we have already an interesting move by Maxime. Maybe because Carlsen went for this move that was not played before, or maybe he was just impulsive or something, but Carlsen mentioned in an interview after the game that Maxime often likes to sacrifice a pawn here and there for nice initiative, and this is exactly what he does here. We have b5 here, and it's a pawn sacrifice. We have pawn captures, knight captures here, queen to a5, offering a trade of queens, and now comes knight to c3, and it's a similar pawn sacrifice like you would have in a Benko gambit or something, where you would have this strong dragon here. The rook would come, let's say, to b8, and then the two rooks would be very strong here, and the two rooks on the A and B file, and the bishop controlling this diagonal will be compensation for the pawn. So it's perhaps a similar idea. But okay, here Maxime goes rook 8 to b8 now. He doesn't bring the other rook to b8, he wants to bring this rook over to c8. And Carlsen develops the rooks accordingly. We have rook f to c1, expecting the other rook to come to c8, rook f to c8, and now b3. So what's Maxime's compensation for the pawn? Well, his pieces are much more active, so if he can make use of this, then the pawn has not been sacrificed in vain. We have e5 by Maxime, and now bishop to h6. You want to get rid of this very strong bishop. Knight to d4 now, going for this knight captures on f3. We have bishop captures, now not capturing immediately, but first knight captures on f3 with check. And now if you capture with the bishop, then bishop captures on h3, so you have to capture with the pawn. Now comes king captures on g7, and here Carlsen immediately goes for f4. He wants to get rid of his double pawn and create a weakness here in black's position. We have queen to a6 now, attacking the d3 pawn twice, and Carlsen just captures on e5. F captures on e5, with D captures on e5, and now comes knight to a4, offering Maxime to go into an endgame, but now it's highly unfavorable for him. If captures, and captures, white's just going to capture on c5, and you get this endgame where Carlsen is up a pawn, but most importantly, he has two connected pass pawns, and it would be winning for white. So after knight to a4, we have knight to d7, guarding the c5 pawn, and now Carlsen goes for rook to c3. Not a very active square for the rook, but again, it gets the job done, similarly to the Caruana game. We have rook to b4 by Maxime, and now comes g4, pushing the bishop back, bishop to e6, and only now knight captures on c5. and this goes into a very long series of exchanges. Knight captures on c5, rook captures on c5, and now if you capture, then just queen captures here. So at least Maxime wants to grab a pawn before finishing off the trade. Rook captures on b3, now comes rook captures on c8. Bishop captures on c8, the queen has to remain on the a file to keep pinning the pawn. Now you cannot capture because of queen captures rook on a1. And here we have rook to c1 by Carlsen. Black gets the d3 pawn. We have rook captures on d3. The queen has to keep an eye on the bishop here. And now comes queen to e2, nicely pinning the pawn here. And it's a very dangerous position. The rook is pinned. Well, not yet, as the bishop also defends the queen, but the queen also defends the a2 pawn, and there's the threat of winning the e5 pawn. So what do you play here? One of the ideas is that the bishop can't really stay there, because bishop to f1 would win the rook here. So Maxime immediately prepares to defend the rook if needed. We have bishop to e6, and he has to give away the e5 pawn. We have queen captures on e5 with check, king to g8, and now comes rook to b1 by Carlsen. As the queen is slicing all the way here, controlling this diagonal, rook to b8 would be a very nice idea. Rook to d8 by Maxime, preventing this, and now comes rook to b8 nevertheless. So there's no time to be grabbing pawns or anything, as rook captures rook would be deadly. So rook captures on b8, queen captures on b8 with check, king to g7, and now you could go for something like queen b2 check, let's say f6 and a3 to defend your a pawn this way. But Carlsen finds a much nicer way to do it. Instead of going for queen b2 check, he plays bishop to d5, and it gets the job done. And also goes into a queen and pawn endgame with Carlsen being up a pawn. So Maxime trades with bishop captures, queen e5 check, f6, and now queen picks up the bishop back while defending the a2 pawn. With h5 by Maxime, g captures, and now comes queen to d7 check. King to g6, and now just a4, as the queen from d7 is protecting the pawn here. We have queen to e2. Maxime's only hope here is to maybe get some sort of a perpetual, but Carlsen doesn't allow that. We have queen to d5, and the queen from d5 controls everything. Controls the d1 square, so no queen d1 check followed by queen captures on a4 is possible. Also controls all of the light squares here, so when king finally comes to g2, black will not be able to deliver check, and the h3 pawn controls the g4 square, so the queen is unable to deliver check from there. So there are no checks to be given. You can go queen e1 check, but then just king g2, and the king will be very safe there. So f5 here by black. We have a5 by Carlsen. He starts pushing his pass pawn. We have f4, and now comes king to g2, not allowing f3 to be pushed, of course. We have king to h6 by Maxime, and now queen to f5, just keeping an eye on that king, not allowing him to come any closer. And now if the black queen moves, Carlsen can even attack the f4 pawn with his king and win it that way, and he will be up 3 pawns. So queen to c4 by black, and now just king to f3. As we already said, this is there was no better move for black, and it was in this position on move 43 that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game, as there is nothing to be done here. Everything is protected. Black can't really make any threats. If you do any check you deliver will result in king captures on f4. Again, everything is protected. You're 3 pawns to 1 pawn. This is a completely winning endgame. Of course, both Maxime and Carlsen know this, so after this king to f3 move, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game. So I don't have the cross table and the final standings, as some of the games are still being played, but what we do know is that Carlsen is definitely the sole leader of the tournament, followed by Fabiano Caruana, who is second, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave here clinches 3rd place, even after losing this last game to Carlsen. And I don't know, we'll most likely check out another game from the final round, and then we're going to check out the standings to be sure. But I did prepare some statistics here, and these are the live ratings of the top 20 players. So as you can see, Carlsen in number 1, well, his official rating is 2862, but he won 17 points in this during this month, so it all has to be accounted for at the beginning of the next month. And as I don't think he will be playing any more classical games since it's the 29th of April that I'm recording this, 2862 plus 70, that's 2879. So that will be his new classical rating, 2879. His all-time best was 2882, so he's 3 points short to reaching his all-time best. And yeah, if he continues playing like this, he will reach his all-time best, and maybe even be the first chess player ever to reach 2900. I mean, it's not really all that big of a deal, because all chess players will at one point reach 2900, because as more players are registered, more players are getting into chess, a lot more rating is fed into the rating system, and of course at the far top the ratings increase. For example, the top grandmaster now would be almost 2900 like Carlsen, and in Fischer's era it would be 2700 would be the highest top, so the top ratings have shifted. But getting 2900 in this day and age would be an extreme accomplishment, so we'll see what happens. If Carlsen continues playing like this, then I'm sure it could very well happen for him. But yeah, that's the game. Carlsen again proves that he reached his top form by winning the Tata Steel tournament, by winning the Gashimov Memorial, and now winning GRENKE Chess Classic with I believe 7.5 out of 9. That's insane. That's 6 wins and 3 draws. That's really crazy. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, we're probably going to cover another game, and now we're going to rest up a bit before the start of the Grand Chess Tour, and we will be continuing our Capablanca saga, checking up on your suggestions and such. I would like to thank Stephen Porta, Charles Cotton, Miguel Martinez Chapa, and Barry McMurdoch for their contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with everything I've already mentioned, and be sure to check up some of the links in the description below. Impressions from the previous round, some nice interviews, and whatever I managed to come up with on the GRENKE Chess Classic YouTube channel. So yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon. Have an excellent rest of your day.